What's up, everybody? This is Betty Wild coming to you from Monsters and Mothers. Thank you so much for tuning in. And today we have another case of a child who is a victim of his own mother. It's extremely unfortunate that these cases keep popping up everywhere. And people are always asking me, where do I get these cases? And how could there be so many? And I can't believe how many just appear out of nowhere almost. I turn here, I turn there. These cases go back so far, and there's so many crimes against children. It is utterly heartbreaking. The saddest cases is when there's a bitterness that happens between two people that once loved each other and brought a child into this world through that love. And then that bitterness that grows where you would rather that the child suffer and the partner that you love suffer than you be without either of them. This is a selfishness that I never quite understood, and there's so much of that happening. And I actually am really disgusted most by how social media is a way for them to vent. So a lot of these mothers and fathers will post these vengeful things on their accounts. They'll even text videos of themselves doing horrendous things to their children with the sole motivation to hurt and destroy them, without thinking at all about how that affects the child. The child is like this object. The child is disposable. This is bitterness, and that is today's topic. And we are going to be covering the case of Najjar Shafreed, an immigrant that came to our country for love.
As little girls and boys, we look up at the glowing angel that gave us life with love and adoration. But for too many, this is not a happy reality. For many, the woman holding us is a true monster. These are their nightmares. Delve deep as we unravel the turbulent bonds between mother and child. You are listening to Monsters and Mothers with your host, Betty Wild.
A heartbreaking tragedy that began with an explosion that trapped both mother and child in a car. This car was seen on the side of the road, and there was no time to spare. Onlookers could see a woman crawling outside of the car, struggling while she was still on fire. Fire investigators sifted through the car wreckage, but there was something odd with what they were looking at. What they uncovered was a dark secret buried in the back seat. It was a premeditated crime against a 5-year-old little boy. But why? No one ever thought this would be Daniel's last birthday. Daniel was a bright, curious young first grader who loved to play karate, loved playing his guitar. You could see the happiness on his face and beautiful smile in all of his photos. Dark days followed his parents' divorce. His parents met in Iran and got married shortly thereafter. Daniel's father brought Najjar to the United States. Daniel's parents were doomed, though, from the beginning. The couple were actually related. They were first cousins, but not biologically because she was adopted. The couple had filed restraining orders against each other. There were even allegations of abuse. It was a bitter divorce and a custody battle over Daniel. His mother was jealous over the nanny her husband had hired and was livid when Daniel spent time with them. It seems at this point she was willing to do anything and go to any length to make sure that her child would not spend any time with his father and the new lover. But to retaliate, Daniel's father hired a private investigator to prove that Daniel's mother was unfit. They were using Daniel as a pawn. However, time would pass, bitterness would fly, hateful emails and texts would go on and on. And on the last day of school, Daniel's mom picked up Daniel and she took him to a lot of different restaurants and then just started to drive around for hours down back roads. And at 3 a.m., she decides to drive to Ocean City, Maryland for a spontaneous beach trip. But they never make it. And on a dark road, the mother loses control of the car, and the car explodes into a fireball. A paramedic who was just coming from another call when he saw the explosion rushed over to the fire. He saw that the mother was on the ground, rolling around in pain. Her clothes burned and her skin was charred. She was screaming that her son was in the car. When he went to check, all 4 doors were locked, forcing the paramedic to break open the window. The paramedic says that the car was filled with smoke, but he was able to break the windows, but he did not see a child or a car seat or anything in the back seat. There was no sign of Daniel. He asked again, "Is your son in there?" And she said yes. And at that point, he wasn't sure if she was just crazy and out of her mind and thought that there was a child when there wasn't. The mother was rushed to the trauma center while the investigation continued on the vehicle that was still smoldering. What they found was a body in the back seat covered by blankets and burnt beyond recognition. A little boy was wrapped up and pushed down in the back seat. The investigators found this very odd. "This isn't right," they said. So an officer and a fire reconstruction team were called in to determine how the fire was started and how did Daniel, the little boy, die. They found it strange that there was more fire damage inside the car than on the outside. Of the car. It just didn't add up. The collision wasn't that massive to cause that big of an explosion. The car fuel tank was completely intact and there was nothing wrong inside or at all with the car to cause this to happen. And they also believed that they could smell gasoline. An arson dog appeared on the scene and jumps on top of the car and smells an odor of gasoline, but it's not coming from the outside of the car. It's coming from the inside. It was all over Daniel's blanket and on Daniel. It seems to be poured everywhere. So the investigators head to the burn center to talk to the mother, who claimed she was hauling 2 jugs of gasoline as an excuse as to why the gasoline was in the car. She said she was going to the beach and didn't want to run out of fuel. She said she filled it up just in case she couldn't find a gas station on the way to the beach. But she forgot and then lights a cigarette and kaboom, she says she caught fire and was thrown out of the car. But in all her storytelling, she never once asked the police about the condition of her son and whether or not he's still alive. For that matter, she was tearless, dry, not one tear for her son. She claims that she filled up her gas tank, and that's why she needed the extra fuel, just in case there was no gas station on the way. But her gas tank wasn't full. Investigators weren't buying her story from the get. The investigators did say that there was an attempt to set the car on fire from the inside, in the front portion of the vehicle. When that failed, the mother then sprinkled gasoline on the child, trying to set him on fire. One crucial thing was discovered. Daniel did not have any soot in his lungs at the time of death, which meant that the child was already dead when the fire started. The medical examiner said he was dead before the fire began. And toxicology shows that he was poisoned and given a fatal dose of diphenhydramine, a common ingredient found in over-the-counter medication. Diphenhydramine is medicine similar to Benadryl. Daniel had 2 times the amount in his blood that would kill an adult. Daniel's mother tells the detectives she unknowingly gave her son too much medicine for his cold and panicked when he stopped breathing. She gave her son Daniel at least a bottle of liquid, maybe even more, on accident. But there were defense wounds on Daniel's face, showing signs that he fought his mother off as she tried to force it down his mouth. The brutal murder and cover-up was staged by the one person he trusted to love and protect him. Daniel suffered for hours while his mother drove around, force-feeding him medicine and waiting for him to die. Once he was dead, she stuffed his body in the back seat of the car. How could a mother have so much hate that she was willing to kill her child instead of letting him go to his own father? The father was right to have her investigated and to prove that she was unfit. This was a case of revenge, and her last text to Daniel's father was, "I will make you cry. You will be sorry." Narges received 50 years in prison for murdering her son Daniel Dana. She begged for mercy, saying she was a desperate woman. The father was so heartbroken that he couldn't even bring himself to speak at the hearing, but wrote a letter instead. Daniel didn't pass in an accident. He passed because this woman wanted to get back at me and sought revenge for divorcing her. No human should do this to their own child. No parent should have to bury their child. Amen to that. May she rot in jail. Thank you for listening in today on this quick session of Monsters and Mothers. I'm your host, Betty Wild.
Thank you for listening to Monsters and Mothers. Subscribe to hear more chilling accounts of mothers who commit unspeakable horrors.